What is compassion? Welcome to Philosopher's Corner. I'm John. What is compassion? Compassion, the standard definition, is the ability to feel someone else's feelings and perspective, and then being moved to alleviate their negative condition. So it's empathizing with somebody and then being moved to action to help them if they're in what the person perceives as a bad or negative situation. So compassion has been with us since the dawn of time, because empathy has been with us since the dawn of time. Compassion it's the basis for all altruism. It's a need for people to want to alleviate the negative situations of other human beings. It's the basis of the careers of most therapists, most social workers. New Age people would say light workers. And it's a deep focus. It's a deep focus on the attempt to alleviate the trauma or negative situations of other human beings. Some people would say that it's one of the most beautiful aspects of human beings. Because it's one human selflessly putting themselves in the other person's situation and then many times ignoring their own needs and coming to the aid of another person based on a personal moral assessment. Even if that person isn't articulating to themselves that it's a moral assessment, it is. That's the feeling that wells up in them when they see that a person is in a bad situation. What they've assessed is a traumatic or negative situation. They've determined that that person is in an immoral state, a state of moral incorrectness. And something inside them motivates them to want to change that person's situation to make it better. And that certainly goes much deeper than our common senses. Now, it can just be a common sense thing. Oh, somebody's starving. I feel bad that they're starving. I want to give them food and alleviate an acute situation. But it also goes much deeper because compassion extends into people's assessment of the other person's soul situation. Certainly it's a deep part of justice, especially modern justice, that now has the advantage of hindsight to look and see which individuals have been wronged or traumatized by institutions, peoples, mechanisms in general, and the internal need to go help those people and distribute them justice, which means to use moral currency and material resources to place that person in a state of moral correctness, is essentially motivated almost exclusively by compassion. Compassion being that skill set we have to empathize with the other person and then be moved to action to help them in some capacity. And in that situation where it's compassion relating to long held traumas that are deeper. And by deeper, we mean that they have affected the person's soul, their psyche, their fundamental human operating system. We know that that is excited and catalyzed by very deep compassion. And that type of compassion, because it's catalyzed by the moral agent or the person or individual who's outside of the other person, can be as deep as that moral agent has gone into themselves, so that they can properly empathize with the other person. Now, they can arrive at that assessment and conclusion that moves them to action in infinite different ways. It can be similar circumstances, similar constitutions, whatever. People with more universal philosophies on life don't require specific circumstances to relate. They can relate in a universal manner. And certainly many spiritual paths' main goal is to excite and grow universal compassion within its adherents, so that they can go out and be universal moral agents, and their chief motivation is compassion. That's their great focus, because it begins with empathy, maybe a little bit of sympathy. Sympathy is simply concern, but you don't necessarily have to take on their stuff. But either empathy or sympathy can lead one to compassion. But once you get into compassion, it requires a much deeper understanding and assimilation of the other person's situation, both emotional and mental perspectives and contexts and situations. But compassion becomes their occupation. And so whether it's local and relative to the situation, or whether the moral agent is more universal in their thinking and compassion, it comes down to a moral assessment of the situation, which includes the resources and the traumas and all of the relevant factors. And then it comes down to action. What action can be taken? Now, the action, it can also be infinite. It could be sharing energy, sending good vibes. It can be tangible. It can be sending food, supplies, monies, building housing. It can be kind of a combination of both, where people decide we're going to change the laws of the land uh, in order to distribute the energies, i.e., justice, energies and resources to these people, person or peoples who require it, because compassion has brought us to a situation where we now understand or believe we have a idea of what the solution is to alleviate or ameliorate the person's condition. A million different ways to get there. But compassion is the name for that set of actions that compels an individual to help another individual. And it doesn't have to be a long, drawn out process. If compassion is there, if you're driving on the road and you see somebody in an accident and you feel overwhelming desire in a split second, you're going from your regular drive, and then you see somebody injured in an accident, and you're a person who immediately hits a hazard, and you pull over, and you are now rendering first aid to somebody and calling the police, when 10 seconds ago you were just enjoying your drive to get home. That's all motivated by compassion. And that can happen. Compassion can change your life in a heartbeat. Or it can be something more long and drawn out. It can be that you look back and you see that your government has a history of maltreatment of individuals or groups, and it compels you to lengthy action, sometimes lifelong action, to realign the systems and sources of your government to alleviate or ameliorate the harms done to individual groups historically. So it can be acute or chronic. Now, obviously, human beings are born with compassion to a very high degree. That's just historical fact when you do the analysis. Very, very high degree. Almost no one's born without compassion. Some people are. They have. There's different reasons why some people are born without compassion. Doesn't make them bad people per se. Some people just don't have, like, you know, parts of the brain don't develop. Nature versus nurture. There's a lot of reasons, and there are people who know what compassion is who decide to weaponize it and strategize it in an immoral way and use it to manipulate people and use it for propaganda and use it for the opposite of what the intention of compassion is. So some people have found ways throughout history to use it to gain power or position or prestige for themselves while manipulating other groups and leaving the situation of people that are in bad situations unhelped. In fact, many times they're comfortable with making their situation worse because if they have set up a system in which they are benefiting off of the misunderstanding or the manipulation of compassion, they can actually make a situation in an extremely deceptive manner where an affected group continues to be affected even worse, and they have set up industries and businesses and charities and all sorts of other things that from the outward appearance are set up to help and be compassionate for the group, when in fact all they're doing is keeping that group at or worse in their situation relative to where they've begun, and the person outside of it has in fact effectively weaponized compassion. Obviously, the corporate medical healthcare system falls largely into that purview. So there are a lot of situations where compassion, leadership, awake people, they understand that compassion is a built-in function and skill set of human beings, and that people are naturally compassionate. So although it is a great driver of all the good in the human species, there are segments of the human species who have decided to weaponize it, manipulate it, and use it to actually make things worse. Oh, these people over here, they're in such bad shape. We should start a war to alleviate their suffering. We should kill all the bad people around them to alleviate their suffering. And then they tap into people's compassion to help this group. Unbeknownst to either group, the person saying it is actually just creating a larger war off of which they profit on all sides, and then sickly enough make people believe that they're a morally just agent, and it somehow strengthens their position of morality and compassion in the eyes of the people who believe them, which further emboldens them to do more harm and do evil. You know, when you strategize your immoral choices for personal gain, and you do it in a self-aware manner, and you're doing it to the extent that you're taking other people's lives and denying them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you are evil. And evil people know how to manipulate compassion. They know how to manipulate empathy. They know how to manipulate sympathy. In fact, they count on it as part of their strategic system. That being said, compassion is one of the most powerful, most beautiful aspects of the human condition, because it compels us to help each other. It compels us to survive. It compels us for natural evolution and the betterment of the species. It's a built-in function to help us better the species. Well, I think that's a good broad strokes on compassion. Feel compassion and do the right thing. Thanks for spending some time here at Philosopher's Corner. I hope you found it helpful, and